Okay, thanks for taking some time to join us on the Uncomfortable Thrill podcast. Coming up today, I'll be joined by my co-hosts Emerson, Lucas and Pang, who will help me with my anthropological exploration into the forces that drive the construction of mountain bike trails, with such great insights as...
Sometimes you can go hours without even realising where time's gone when you're just like swinging a pick and slapping dirt.
Pushing my bike somewhere with a spade and a rake and getting stoned and then going and walking through the bush and just trying to envision a ride and then start scratching that.
Having that absolute fear and then having to push through it. There's definitely some sort of a joy in that. I don't know, it's kind of sadistic almost.
But first, a word from our sponsor. This episode of The Uncomfortable Thrill is brought to you by Vertigo Bikes, located at 4 Beacon Street in Queenstown. If you're ever down there, just head on in to get all your bike hire needs sorted out. Also, mention the code word Stalingrad and receive a 10% discount on any apparel. Alright, let's get back to it. So like all great things, let's start with a question. Why is it so common to find mountain bikers so willing to abandon their bikes for a shovel, even in areas with an abundance of trails, such places as Queenstown? To address this question, we will go on a journey through a number of anthropological theories, starting with specific and rigid concepts. We can build a foundation from which we can expand both horizontally and vertically, in an attempt to delve deep into the recesses of the human psyche and explore the forces that drive the interactions between land, shovel and bike. Our journey begins with some more well-established concepts within anthropology, and here we'll be using those of niche construction and territorialism. Niche construction typically refers to the cultivation of land and the construction of shelter. These practices would have likely date back deep into our hominid past and would have also required a lot of group cohesion and working together. So it's likely that groups that worked together and were more successful, and in turn this sort of fostered a sense of positive emotion and things like group membership and just stronger social bonds, which are aspects that my co-hosts can relate to quite freely, as Lucas does here when recounting some of our time together.
Yeah, I guess building the track with you, that was pretty cool. It was like we got to build that together, so that was cool, like the camaraderie with that. And then also, obviously, when people started riding it and started being stoked on it a little bit, that's definitely cool.
Pang has also had similar experiences to this.
Back then, everyone made time to get together once or twice a week to go digging and trail building, so it was a good time. It was really social. You'd catch up, you'd take a few beers with you, and you just talk shit the whole time. And it's great times. I'm sure you've experienced as well. It's just a really good time that you can just really catch up with your mates as well while you sort of put some graft in, bouncing ideas off each other.
A different but related concept to niche construction is that of territorialism. Territorialism is a proclamation of ownership over a particular piece of land. Mountain bikers do this through the ways in which they construct their trails. Aspects such as style, skill, and risk all play a role and demonstrate to other riders that may ride the trail of the creator's ability. And once again, my co-host can easily resonate with these ideas.
I think that when I look back now, I'm kind of I helped build that track. It's like my own little mark, And so when people ride it, it's I don't know, it's like your own signature before you left. We're going now, but you guys, when you ride that track, that was our track.
But you did right, I guess. It is all probably quite primeval when you dig down into it, because you're just you want to claim your bit of land and leave your mark on it and say, this is mine, I did this. And
building on from these concepts, we may delve deeper and look at how and why people come together to volunteer their time and energy, not only in the construction of mountain bike trails, but in many aspects of mountain biking lifestyle. The best suited concept for this is that of communities of practice. Communities of practice is now quite a very broad theory, but predominantly it deals with how people come together when they're around a shared interest. This can be seen very extensively throughout the mountain biking communities, and many of the experiences of both Pang and Emerson in Queenstown really highlight this in the ways that Pang and his mates came together in the early days to essentially form what they called an alliance. Ties in with this theory to a remarkable degree, as it does with Emerson in building projects he's involved in that are more formalised and organised. That it has a deeper root of a social bonding in it, and it kind of expands on the concept of niche construction. Niche construction is quite a definitive concept with definitive actions that sort of see those processes played out, whereas community practices can involve things that don't involve physical labour at all. And both Pang and Emerson have experienced this to a large degree in either setting up races such as the Funduro or larger events such as Magazafest. They've both experienced a coming together of people that aren't just sort of building a jump that they want to huck. It's volunteering, doing simple things as directing spectators or doing water runs to keep the jumps wet. They're jobs that aren't necessarily particularly glorious, but it's about participating as a member of that community. But I think it would be best if they put it into some of their own words.
We had a little band, we had like a little group. We called ourselves the Alliance, and we had t-shirts and stuff made. The Alliance was Ginge, Tom, and me predominantly, but then there was another few other guys as well. But basically, if you missed like 2 digs, you got kicked out of the Alliance. So you had to like do 3 digs in a row to get back in and stuff like that. So it's just like constant banter, like and pressure to go along, because you just get so much shit of everyone else if you didn't turn up. But it was really good fun. And then if you did so many in a row, you became the president of the Alliance, and then like you got all these like kind of privileges and kind of things.
This is a great example of a very informal setup of a community of practice, while Emerson, as an example from the Queenstown Mountain Biking Club, a much more formal organisation, but the parallels between them are very strong, because it's essentially revolving around this central idea of a community of practice.
That's all volunteer, man. Yeah. Like, someone's sort of in charge of the membership or the merchandise, sort of the cases, but then there's some of us that kind of oversee like Gorge Road and Wynyard and that sort of thing. So when there's new stuff getting planned or whatever, like for instance, it was Pete that was the initiator of this new jump trail. So he spent hours behind the scenes getting funding applications from the Southland Community Trust, or getting Queenstown Council on board and like walking up there in the bush with them, showing exactly where it's going to be, and so hours and hours of volunteer time for sure.
As stated earlier, communities of practice is a very broad concept, but one avenue of it I would like to delve a little bit deeper into is the role learning plays. Within communities of practice, the notion of learning is used as an example of how people move and navigate throughout their lives. It's also often depicted as a landscape, resulting in perplexing parallels to the mountain biking world in both the community and physical practice by those who ride and construct trails. This notion can be summed up well in a quote from Etienne Wenger, one of the founders of this concept, and its relation to learning in the everyday. Quote, "The landscape shapes our experience of ourselves. Practice, people, places, regimes of competence, communities, and boundaries become part of who we are." Unquote. Another predominant factor within communities of practice and learning is the emphasis on how we learn. Practitioners in this field have demonstrated time and again that we actually learn from others slightly above our ability. We don't tend to learn from, say, a master craftsman. We learn from apprentices that are slightly higher than us. That's how we adapt and gain our skills. Emerson has had an experience of this, of when he first moved to Queenstown. And
getting to Queenstown, I was definitely pretty average. I mean, I was riding Gorge Road and riding some of the sort of medium-sized jumps, so I wasn't terrible. But then when you're surrounded by people that are really good, your expectation or your vision of what is good just shoots through the roof, right? You're like, holy crap, okay, I thought I knew what good looked like. And then you see these guys, you're like, okay, it's another level. So, but then because you've seen things happen right in front of you on stuff that you're riding, you're like, all right, cool. Well, that's what the level is. I should just try that. And then you do try it, and sometimes you fail, and sometimes you succeed, and you're like, and that's just how you learn and get better.
As stated earlier, there's a link between the first concepts of niche construction and communities of practice that sort of link together in how the community works and the process of doing physical labour, but then expanding on that into communities of practice where it's not necessarily physical labour that can foster that sense of community. Here I'd like to use the notions within communities of practice of learning and how that helps us or can be used as a metaphor of how we move through life. I'd like to move on to the concept of the British anthropologist Tim Ingold, who developed a theory of lines, and it's closely connected with learning, but it's essentially the notion that he says himself that every living being is a line, and that just by essentially existing and living, we form lines in the way we move through our lives, and competence plays a large role in this. It's a theory that really delves into quite an abstract and metaphysical world, so I will attempt to break it down in some sort of brief and consumable way. A large part of the theory of lines deals with the perception of ourselves in the world and beings in the world. And so first we actually need to digress all the way back to the 15th century to visit René Descartes with his quote, "I think, therefore I am." Descartes was a skeptic. He doubted everything. He doubted the world around him. He doubted his own body, and he came to that conclusion of "I think, therefore I am," sort of perceiving that his notion of thinking was the only thing that he could know for sure, and it created what was known as the Cartesian divide, which is a separation between the body and the mind. And through a lot of work since Descartes' time, this really has sort of broken down, and it's Tim Ingold uses the work of a number of sort of psychologists and other anthropologists in coming up with the way we perceive the world around us is really, they're all inseparable factors. Our mind isn't inseparable from our body because it navigates through the world, but our world in a way is not inseparable from our own body. We move through the world, and our mind reacts with our body, and our body reacts with the environment, and the environment reacts off our body. So all these things are constantly in flux, constantly reacting off each other. So to try and separate them is impossible. There's often a notion we have as people of being in our head. There's an in here and an out there, but in Ingold's reality, there is no in here and out there. There just is. We just are these things in the world, and so his theory of lines is not the placement of our life being a line placed upon the landscape of the world. The lines of our life are literally ingrained through the world. And again, this theory is very, very broad and really quite abstract, but it really is quite surprising how well it ties into the construction of mountain bike trails with the navigating of building skill. A skill is a large part of the theory of lines, and it requires that we sort of learn and navigate. We create new lines, we fix new lines, we see how lines play out, and then from that we are able to expand the creation of our lines and become better adept at doing that. It really is hard to kind of get to the essence of some of this, and I had trying to sort of talking to my co-hosts to get their views on this. It does take time to delve deep into this, and some of them struggle to really put what some of their actions and motivations were into actual words. This resulted in sometimes quite a bit of bewilderment, and they were unsure how exactly to respond to the question. So some common sort of responses were
yeah, what?
I don't know what to say about that, really.
This area really does penetrate very, very deeply into the human psyche, and it's very hard to get sort of conscious responses to the forces that play out in this field. Comments that my co-hosts made, it's possible to see where these parallels are, and again, like communities of practice, it's quite striking where they are. A prominent feature of the theory of lines is the development of skill with these lines and expanding on that, and it can be seen in the mountain biking community with how trails are built and how it kind of takes some time to really adapt to have your vision change and for you to see how lines work and how they line up with one another.
That's like once you actually get the chance, because you ride them in small segments as you're trying to do it just to have a look, and then by the time you get it all the way through, and once you got that, you can let off the brakes and kind of flow with it. Some things that you're kind of like, oh, this was going to be like that. It's just like in the flow of the whole thing, it's like, whoa, because you're not just sitting back and being like, that's what I'm going to hit now, and so you go off and hit it. You're actually like on the whole motion of the track, so you're in the flow.
Because at the end of the day, you don't actually know if what you're doing is going to work sometimes, and you're just doing best guess from your experience. And I guess you do, and everybody's got different experiences and ridden different stuff. You do have to bring it all together into one kind of melting pot, and then work together there to kind of figure out what's going to work best for that terrain you've got. So, and there's never a right or wrong answer. It's just kind of.
Although our journey has been brief, I'd like to propose an answer to the question stated at the beginning of this podcast as to why mountain bikers would abandon their bikes for a shovel. And that is that the act of building and riding mountain bike trails really is a physical manifestation of how humans move throughout the landscape of their lives. And I hope this talk has been able to communicate this in a clear and concise way. So I implore you, get out there, swing a pick, slap some dirt, ride your bike, and live your life. Alrighty guys, thanks for joining us today. I hope that podcast somewhat made sense. Big shout out to Emerson, Lucas and Pang for their time and energy. Also a big shout out to Jolene at Val Stranger Design. She did some artwork for me, which is amazing. And if you'd like to follow us on Instagram, you can do that at The Uncomfortable Thrill. Or if you want to support the podcast, you can do that at patreon.com/The Uncomfortable Thrill. Cheers guys. Peace out.